Hi everyone, welcome to the Poetry Cafe at the Briarcliff Manor Public Library. Today we're featuring Vanessa H. Smith and James K. Zimmerman. And going up first is Vanessa. So Vanessa Hedwig Smith is a painter, filmmaker, and writer who has lived and worked in India, Nepal, England, and the US. Her work and full bio can be seen at vanessahsmithpictures.com. She holds a BA from Stanford in urban design, an MA from Columbia University in anthropology, and has studied at the Writing Institute at Sarah Lawrence with Carla Carlson and Elaine Sexton. Smith feels like a porcelain doll on a roller coaster, through a troubled and interesting world, aware of bits of hair, dust, and dirt swirling around. She marvels that these times of trouble and protest have coughed up insights, ideas, and beauty. A few constants in Smith's work are references to color, passages about verticality, descriptions of people that come through portraits or signatures, things that are concrete and man-made, sunlight, and death. Her debut chapbook, Room Tone, was published by Finishing Line Press in 2024. She is at work on a hybrid memoir.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for coming. And I'm really honored to be here at the Briarcliff Manor Public Library. I haven't been in Briarcliff Manor in a long time, since our son was in nursery school in Briarcliff. He had a great, great time. And it's a lovely place. This is a great, joyous place of books. And thank you for pairing me with James, because I'm honored to be with you. So I have this one little chapbook, tiny little chapbook. I'm working on a big book right now. And I've just freelanced all my life and lived in a lot of places. But I wanted to say I read some things about James, some of his work. And I really marveled about, somebody mentioned being a rose gardener. Is that correct? And roses have figured very, very prominently in my life. When I was in kindergarten, there was no Spanish equivalent for Vanessa. So my teacher named me Rosa, which means pink, and I loved it. Rainer Maria Rilke, as you know, famously pricked himself on a rose bush and died as a result of it, blood poisoning. And he is my favorite poet. For my wedding, I chose all kinds of poetry and made a lot of Rilke into a ceremony. And roses are also really important, because I had trouble learning to read, and I didn't really read very well until I was about in fourth grade. And I used to water the roses. That was my job at home, and read biographies and fairy tales. So I really appreciate all that. Anyway, so I just want to set a couple things in place through dates. Last October 2nd, we were in India, and it was Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, and all about peace and civil disobedience and reconciliation and all kinds of good things. And then 5 days later, October 7th happened. So I wrote something on the road about that. And then I'd written something earlier about January 6th. So I'm going to read those two pieces right now. A few lines from that poem. To fight or to pray, what color is prayer? Everyone has a reference point to stand in, because the sky encourages these things that refer and cross into the delicacy of being able to believe. All the while, the clouds have been undressing and watching our exploits. Ground maneuvers happen, the opposite of cleansing, and where nothing is routine. And then this first poem in the chapbook is about January 6th. The beginning seams of January, into palm, psalm, and olive, purity and extracts grown from inactive places are forced into action, while far-flung markets seem stripped and cleared from their boring constitution. The beginning of capability is to pronounce words, jump freedom, solid and paper-like at the same time. States of mind proposed remain held together with pins and glue. Some people are born in and run at January. The fear of winter weather might make them sturdy and excellent creatures, or not. Now this, another January, will come again. On the heels of hushed discussion, the idea is to act and then to dismount at once. So I'm a filmmaker, as Kim said, and I worked for about 10 years. I've freelanced all my life, but I work on my own stuff, and then I do jobs all the time. and I made a series of 94 short films called The Art of Impermanence. And they played at a satellite show in the Venice Biennale for 6 months, like for 8 to 10 hours a day. They were translated into Italian and are in English. So I'd like to read something that has to do with that project. It's not in the book, but it's called Blank Space. Blank space, sideways people, purchased, blanket statements, unbalanced banking, a life formula just a smile away. For you could be my time, my song, before a relationship became suffering, not noticed once upon balanced back and backs into mischief. Shower in front of another person and the room you read, a marriage ceremony of poems read out loud before I lost the weight that was poetry class, lavender. A single yellow dress as well, to have been barefoot an entire day in one's 60s, promises of forward, a menstrual attitude. So Don and I lived, my husband and I lived in India and Nepal. I'm going to read one short poem from the book that is about marriage. He asked me once, we married twice. My kayaker boyfriend wrote out the proposal for me to check one box, yes, no, maybe, on a sweet and low packet. With time to spare the morning of the first wedding, a few of my friends and I watched glass bead necklaces thread in the bazaar. Late morning, the travel agent threw a fit with one of our travelers, and I had to intervene. The wedding was planned to take place in a monastery that very same November, Nepal afternoon, and I almost missed it. My mom had asked if he got my engagement ring from a box of Cracker Jacks, a compliment since my favorite tiny plastic doll came from a long ago box. Number 2 wedding would be official, so again I had to think about it carefully. I happened to be invited to an ayahuasca ceremony in the West Village and took the opportunity to ask the big question again, should I marry him? I thought I was too young. I was 34. Full of hallucinogenic ayahuasca, I dreamt I was drowning. He rescued me by gently lifting me to the water's surface to breathe. The second wedding was planned outside in Central Park, but it rained, and we ended up being married in Pandora's box by a man who married people who were not baptized. Unprepared to read our ceremony in a dark room, the minister lit a match to see the poem-studded nuptials, my only copy. He almost burned them all then and there. So I'm going to read this other poem, which is called Kathmandu, and it's about while we were living in Kathmandu. Can I get a tiny bit of water? Sorry. Thank you. Okay. So this is called Kathmandu. Buddha has lived here and does still. I became a newlywed then, in this place, with little purchase. My husband had lived here before with his precious girlfriend who drowned in a river. The road she was driving along collapsed and left her no way to escape. She has an identical twin sister. Just inside our small home, decorated in pink and red, there was a place reserved for watching over the dead. I became a discoverer twice there. Things that animals do not notice, that they are being considered for sacrifice, that their owners are hungry, that they may become food. One day I was asked to join a tour group traveling from America to visit a Tibetan doctor. I knew the group's leader. He was an author who wrote about forbidden waterfalls, hidden mountains, and secrets. I did not know what to expect. This doctor called on each of us to approach her, as one by one she quietly identified our affliction, sucked out blood and hair and bits of gristle through our skin, which she spat out into a big silver bowl. One woman had breast cancer. I was the last to be treated, didn't have to identify my area of illness. Without a word, the doctor unzipped my pants and sucked near my right ovary. When I got home, I stripped and took a picture of myself in the mirror. Teeth marks and a big oval showed up. That same week, I had asked the local butcher about when he would need more meat. The day before, I had noticed that 2 goats waited, tethered behind his shed. I asked to film the procedural slaughter, as I imagined it would be fascinating. What I saw then was an hour-long dance of the greatest precision, like surgery done in open air, starting with the neck being slit while the goat was still held by the rope. After the head came off, the body shook. A bit later, the body crumpled to the ground. The butcher split the animal open lengthwise and opened it like a book, took various organs out, separating them into bowls. Last were the long beads of intestine. They were a lighter pink compared to other parts. Blood was at a minimum and also put into a separate bowl. This was 30 years ago. The most startling violence of this, the thing I remember most of all, left to watch, the second goat still tied to the rope. So I'm writing, Kim said I'm writing a book right now. I'm calling it a written hybrid memoir documentary in book form. I would rather be writing a cookbook, but I don't have the talent. So anyway, my mom was a portrait painter and taught me a lot about looking. And also she painted me all the time. In fact, this is me many years ago. This is my brother. And I learned a lot by having somebody look at me, because I was always thinking, what is she seeing? What is she thinking about when she's looking at me? And one of my most memorable days posing for her, I happened to be sick. I was in, again, fourth grade. Everything happened in fourth grade. I was really sick. And she said, "Can I paint you?" I said, I was basically throwing up. And I said, "Okay." Dragged myself downstairs, lay on a couch, and I looked pretty much like a little dead bird. But it was an interesting day because I was thinking, she's looking at her sick daughter, I'm looking at her, and having this exchange. So anyway, a version of all this stuff will go into my book, but this is not in the book. This is not in this book. It'll be in the next book. But I like to write a lot about painters and about portraits and about what we see. So, and Anne Carson is a very famous writer who has written a book called, I don't know what it's called. It's all short talks. It's little talks. So do you all know who Francis Bacon is? The very famous painter who painted that triptych worth $1 bazillion. So I wrote a short talk on the disorder of the painter, Francis Bacon, after Anne Carson. If our friend had not sold Francis Bacon's famous triptych, he would be well beyond the millions he did amass. Some people are good with money. Elon Musk can afford to go up in a spaceship and still have a gazillion to spare. The zeros into Star Wars territory, or the wars of the stars. On board. People are onboarding into their portals. Spilled. There was a Vogue magazine article on Bacon's painting studio, which included a photo of various shades of pink and red, painted circle shapes on his door, which he used like a giant vertical palette. Bacon's only exercise was pacing in front of a canvas, and his idea of dieting was to shun egg yolks, desserts, and coffee, while continuing to guzzle a half-dozen bottles of wine and 2 or more large restaurant meals per day. Bacon might be circling the planet, holding in one hand a bottle of wine and brushing the sky with the other. The definition of presence of mind in another language you can almost smell. Etwomotia prevnapatos in Greek, Buddha tat parata in Hindi. So in some of our travels, there's certain things that people eat all over the world, and butter is very prominent in India. So anyway, I wrote something called I just have 2 more little things to read. Another short talk on the culture of butter. Maybe butter, American version, otherwise better even English or Irish. It turns out that New Zealand had the highest worldwide consumption of butter in 2022. What a difference it might make if one lived in Japan, where white rice is the supreme staple food. Too much of anything can be negative. About 13.5% of the Japanese population have some type of glucose issue or type 2 diabetes, partially as a result of rice consumption, not to mention their major other weight gain. In the Two Fat Ladies Full Throttle Cookbook, it is absolutely clear that mixing butter with mustard in almost any recipe is magnifique, especially with scallops and salmon, skin side up. With a dash of dill, taste buds run, to put rapture in one's mouth. Taking the sting away from the chaos of our generalized times, for those of Gen Z in particular, the 25-year-olds who were wee ones when 9/11 occurred. Get back to butter for another age. Read a cookbook to calm down the day. And I want to say, I feel very happy that cookbooks are here, because I read cookbooks to get calm. My husband was just in the hospital for cardiac, issues. I took that particular cookbook, and it really made me feel better. That's it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate being here. I really do.